I really wanted to like Life is Strange Double Exposure, especially seeing as this one is a direct sequel to the original Life is Strange, meaning we once again get to play as Max Caulfield and enjoy the roller coaster in another time entangling story where we make definitive decisions and suffer the consequences of those choices. I really loved the first one, and I think that's why I'm so disappointed with Double Exposure, because in my opinion, it unfortunately misses the mark. Now, before we can continue, I need to do a quick spoiler alert. This is one of those games where there isn't really a whole lot of gameplay as such. 90% of this game is storytelling, so there's no way to really accurately review this game without giving away some spoilers. So here is everything I will discuss and show you in the review. This game follows the events of the original Life is Strange, the first one, so you probably want to play that first anyway, and I will definitely be spoiling the ending of the first Life is Strange. Now, the game is 5 chapters long, so I will discuss a major spoiler in chapter 1, as the whole game is based around this event. I can't review the game properly without talking about it. I will also have some minor spoilers in chapter 2, and I will show a very brief clip from chapter 3, just to show off a bug. I'm going to also talk about the ending. While I won't be too specific about what happens, I will give you a warning for when we get to that point, so you can skip to the next part of the video. So if you do want to watch this video, but you don't want to hear my ending discussion part, there will be a link with some chapters in the description below, so you can go to the next section. And again, I'll give you a warning when I get to that point. Okay, so spoiler alerts out of the way, let's talk about Life is Strange Double Exposure. So it is set 10 years after the events of the original Life is Strange and follows the ending in which Max does not save Chloe and prevents the storm destroying Arcadia Bay. Max has moved on from Arcadia Bay and now finds herself at Caledon University in Lakeport. The university president, Yasmin, has offered a position and residence at the university where Max runs her own photography workshops and is best friends with Yasmin's daughter, Safi. I will start out by saying, as someone who is a big fan of the characters from the original Life is Strange, it is great to see Max has some established status in the photography world, as her students and colleagues admire her work, her passion, and it's great to see her in a place that welcomes and admires her, especially after what happened in Arcadia Bay. This game does a really great job in the first chapter, laying the foundations between some of those close friends Max has at the university. Entering into an abandoned bowling alley with Safi to get some classic Max Caulfield pictures, and the two join Moses, an astrophysicist, for some rooftop drinks and stargazing. Like I said, the game does a fantastic job in the opening chapter, and it introduces some of that decision making which the franchise is known for. By the way, this game still does the iconic end screen after each chapter, which details the choices you make and gives you an indicator on what other players did, which I've always liked. I think that's really cool. I also love the interactions on the phone with text messages and social media posts. That is done really well here. It's very believable. The music here is great. I can't really show that off due to copyright reasons, but the music fits in with the overall themes of this game really well. Now, let's get to the main point in the story. In the first chapter, whilst Max, Safi, and Moses are stargazing, Safi gets a phone call. This gives Max and Moses a bit of time to connect, as they are really acquaintances and Safi is the close mutual friend connection. So the game gives the two of those a chance to connect, which is all just as well, because later Max follows Safi and discovers that she has been suddenly shot dead at the Overlook. The death ripples through the university and major events are cancelled, memorials are set up, and many are grieving. Max is in despair and reminded of how she lost Chloe, but it's been so long since she's used her powers to rewind time that she actually has lost the ability to do so. Of course, even if she had the power to do that, she also has the understanding that rewinding time often leads to more trouble. There's always a price to pay when using her powers in this way. However, she discovers she now has a new power. Instead of rewinding time, Max can travel to an alternate parallel timeline in which Safi is still alive. The timelines both run simultaneously, and Max will spend the rest of the game switching between these two timelines to gain information into the events surrounding Safi's death, and if it's possible to even save her. With two timelines, there are now two different sets of characters to manage and engage with. It is possible that a character might have one opinion of Max in one timeline but see her a little bit differently in another. In my playthrough, in the timeline where Safi dies, Max's potential love interest Amanda wants to put the relationship on ice because she doesn't believe Max is in the right state of mind to have such a relationship. However, in the timeline where Safi is still alive, Amanda doesn't have a reason to put a halt on the relationship. Honestly, I don't mind this new power, as you can eavesdrop from a different timeline to gain information, you can bring items across the different timelines. It's done in a pretty good way, and it's a classic Life is Strange experience. But that's unfortunately where my positive praise for this game ends, because there are some key problems which really hampered my enjoyment. Firstly, some small stuff. There were some technical hiccups which I didn't expect to have. I had a couple crashes on PlayStation 5, all of which managed to happen during key cutscenes, which is really frustrating because it just takes you out of that moment when you're trying to get immersed in this narrative. But there were also a couple parts where the sound mixing was just off. People sounded slightly muffled in the admin building for some reason. And I know that the music is great, but there were some times where it was just overpowering that I couldn't hear what the people were saying on screen.
Anyone, ever. I don't know if I will again.
But the most disappointing thing about this game was the story itself. After my playthrough, I went through and watched clips of other people making different decisions, and I have to say, I really do feel that your decisions matter very little in this game. I know that in the original Life is Strange, it all ended up coming down to a binary decision at the conclusion of the game, being you save Chloe or you save Arcadia Bay. But all the bits leading up to that still mattered, and you had to deal with those consequences both in the short and long term. Whereas in this game, the choices are just not significant enough. Everything plays out pretty much the exact same way, with some characters maybe having a slightly different opinion of you. This is a big shame, because if this game is all about dealing with the consequences of your own actions, then maybe the player needs to have some actual consequences to deal with. I didn't really feel any guilt or remorse or even wishing I could go back in time to change my decision, because it felt, and this is before I looked back and saw that the decisions didn't really matter, even in the moment it felt like I was having very little impact. And that's a huge, huge shame, especially for a game like this. Life is Strange Double Exposure seems to be all about half measures. It sort of gives you the choice, but it doesn't matter. It sort of sets up a couple mysteries, but then just doesn't answer enough of the questions. And instead of having the player reflect upon the gameplay experience and perhaps looking inwards into their own life, you instead feel almost cheated of a creative and interesting story with a satisfying message. The thing for me that made Life is Strange very special was not just because at the time of its release I was a moody teenager who would see a narrative about other moody teenagers and cling on to it, but it was because the key takeaway message of that game was this sort of inevitability when it comes to time and consequences. No matter what you did in the original Life is Strange, Chloe seemed to be destined to die, and the only way you could save her was to see the lives of everybody else in the town ruined. There's always a price to pay. The idea that when a butterfly flaps its wings, it could cause a hurricane is seen quite literally in Life is Strange, and it sort of left me feeling with the idea that when the chips are down and things are going south, even if I had the power to rewind time, a small insignificant change could still have devastating consequences, so much to the point where you're better off just living in the moment. there will always be trials and tribulations that we have to endure. And instead of trying to avoid those trials, we need to face them because they can shape us, define who we are, or to use a very teen term, we need to face them because they're our canon events. Seeing people a similar age to you who, bar some trauma and superpowers, are honestly, for me at least, very relatable characters and living in very relatable circumstances. It is a great way to tell a story when those characters are so relatable. And when I finished the original Life is Strange, I felt, okay, my life is not going how I pictured it to be, but I can overcome this and become a better person. And it's funny because when I sit here playing the game today and I'm thinking about my own current transgressions that I'm enduring, there was nothing impactful to draw on. And I'm not saying that the measure for how strong a story is should be purely on the basis of what message I can take out of it and apply to my own life. But I guess I'm saying that this story wasn't special. It was generic, it was uninspiring, and I really did feel this playthrough was a waste of time and a bit of a disappointment. Now, I'm going to touch on some parts of this game's ending. If you don't want to hear this part, please go in the link below, skip to the next chapter where I talk about pricing and DLC for this game. So now that I'm in the spoiler section of this review, I can get a little more specific. Deck 9, for some reason, decided to tell a story about characters using their powers to exact vengeance on others, and even position themselves as some sort of god. It is very unrelatable and just completely destroys the setting this game has, because it forces you to look at a character in a way where you can no longer recognize or empathize with their position. I was fully invested in knowing what happened to Safi, and every twist and turn that came at me had me asking more questions. But as the game presents to you who is behind it, as well as that person's motives, it left me feeling that this was just incredibly generic and I didn't care as much. There are characters in this world that have to deal with some really dark and heavy themes: suicide, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, a guilt of, why didn't I do this? If I did it this way, then things could have been different. And this is all terrible and heavy stuff that real people in the real world face. And I think the way this story has been told removes the weight of those themes. And when you completely break the world in the way Deck 9, the developers, have done here, it just loses that impact. Yes, you can rewind time in the original Life is Strange, but there are other events in this game that take place which are so far removed from the foundations that you don't get that impact and you don't feel that empathy by the end of this story. Also, there is a character in this game that just blatantly has no resolution. As in, it sets up a mystery around this character. The player and other characters would start questioning and digging around just to go, oh, actually, I'm not going to look into this any further. That is literally the explanation they give for just not completing this character's story. I'm not sure if they just ran out of ideas or they had something and then decided it wouldn't work and just threw it away, but this feels really unfinished. And that, combined with this story's ending, to me, it feels like the developers are trying to create this big overarching universe, which I don't really think is going to work, and at the moment isn't resonating with me. I think a more grounded experience is better suited for the stories told in Life is Strange. And I really think that this game was a massive waste of potential with the characters that they had. Okay, now I'm going to talk about pricing and DLC. Firstly, this game is available on PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X and S. While it won't be available on old-gen hardware, it will, in the future, be coming to Nintendo Switch. Now, for the pricing, the standard game is $50 US, while the deluxe edition is $60 with a couple extra outfits. Or you can go for the Ultimate Edition for $80, which includes more outfits as well as exclusive cat content. Now, the cat content is an additional part in the game where you can find a runaway cat and you have to take care of it as it's lost its owner. Now, you can also just buy the standard edition and then get the cat content upgrade for $20, which is what I did because I'm not really that interested in the additional outfits. But I have to be honest with you, the cat content is really not worth it. I really don't think it added much to the story, and I feel Square Enix very tactically worked out that a lot of the audience who are going to play this game will see cat content and just buy it. I'm going to be honest, my personal opinion, I really don't think it added to the story. I don't think it was worth that extra cash. It's a really small thing on the side. I didn't get a lot of value out of it. That's my take. Now, I tried to explore this game as much as possible, tried to have as many conversations as possible, and I got to around 12 hours of gameplay across the 5 chapters. I don't think this game particularly dragged on or was paced badly. The first couple chapters were really good. I was on the edge of my seat. It's only in the last 2 chapters, I would say, where the game just breaks apart. Those great foundations that have been building on with different characters and events, it just stops, takes a right turn, and chooses a very generic story that, in my eyes, fails to capture the magic that the first game did. The original Life is Strange, in my eyes, has always been the best in the series. You can go pick up all 5 episodes and the Before the Storm prequel in a remaster for $40 right now. And I can wholeheartedly recommend that and tell you that I love that game and all the themes that came along with it. But as for Life is Strange Double Exposure, it just doesn't burn as bright. I'm aware that a lot of other critics are rating this game quite highly, and if this story resonated with you, then that's absolutely fine. These story games are incredibly subjective, and I'm glad to see people are really enjoying this game and getting something out of it. But for me, I didn't love it, and I felt that it ended up being a huge missed opportunity. And for those reasons and everything else I've spoken about in this video, Life is Strange Double Exposure does not earn my recommendation. At the end of the day, this is just my opinion, so please, I'd love to hear what you think of this game down in the comment section below. Please let me know if you enjoyed it or if you're planning to pick it up. Additionally, if you did enjoy this video, please don't forget to leave a like and also subscribe so you don't miss out on my next video. To see more reviews, click on the playlist on the right or roll the dice and click on the left for a video YouTube thinks you might like. Thank you so much for watching. Lancy out.